I'm going to be asking Wanda these questions and telling her your stories, and she's going to give you her take on what you could do to improve your relationship with that manager or with your team if you are that manager.
Your job as a manager is not to know it all. Your job is to guide it, to steer it. You may have the final authority that says go or no go, but by the time you get to the no or go decision, I want that to be a foregone conclusion with the majority of the team because they've been invested. People are so overwhelmed. I am so busy getting things done that are essential to get done that I can't even think 3 months ahead. Make what you have to decide decision today. And if you can wait, then wait until you have to decide. How do I know if I've made a right decision? And my answer is you will probably never know if it was right or not right. And the reason is that for many of these decisions, there isn't a right or a wrong. See, what I need you to do is to not argue with it, not ask a probing question, and just say, oh, okay, let me think about that. And then I want you to go away and actually kind of do some homework. What could that be about? There is no growth in comfort and no comfort in growth. Yet the big leaps are how careers are made and how businesses excel. So how do you master not knowing at all or feeling like an imposter? How do you have the conversations that lead to trust and, of course, excellence? How do you take charge of the things that you can control? How do you thrive outside your comfort zone? That's what this podcast is about. I'm your host, Wanda Wallace, and it's time to get out of your comfort zone.
Welcome to Out of the Comfort Zone. If you're a long-term listener of the podcast, you might be thinking, wait a minute, that's not Wanda's voice. And you'd be right. We're switching things up this week. Normally, Wanda is interviewing experts on their research, but today we've got Wanda here as the expert. My name is Bianca, I'm on Wanda's team, and I have gathered several questions from listeners like you who want to ask Wanda questions on the newsletter, on everything that's been coming up over the last couple months. And especially this week, our topic is managers. What are managers struggling with? And what are people struggling with that are working with managers? We've asked you on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on all social media platforms to send in your questions, to send in your stories. And today I'm going to be asking Wanda these questions and telling her your stories, and she's going to give you her take on what you could do to improve your relationship with that manager or with your team if you are that manager. So do you want to go right into it, Wanda? Is there anything you want to say before we start?
Nope, you're in charge.
All right. So the first question is something that I think especially many mid-career managers can relate to. And we've heard this story on both sides. So from managers and from the people that have been dealing with managers. And it's making decisions. So we've had several people say that their manager is dragging their feet when it comes to making decisions, and that oftentimes then the team has to scramble and the thing that they were producing ends up not being as good as it could have been, and everybody's exhausted. And even a good decision maybe seemed like a bad one in the moment because there wasn't enough time to finish it. And at the same time, we've had stories from managers who say that they are fearful about making decisions or that they ruminate upon it. And for example, we've had one person send in, I'm going to read you what they said. I've been managing a team for about a year, and mostly I've grown into my role by now. But one thing I still struggle with is making big decisions, especially when they affect others. I make them because I have to, but I still think about whether I've made the right choice long after. How do I know what's right? So Wanda, how do we know what's right?
All right. It may surprise you that I get that question from many people that I coach, all the way up to the CEOs that I've coached. How do I know if I've made a right decision? And my answer is you will probably never know for some of the decisions if it was right or not right. And the reason is that for many of these decisions, there isn't a right or a wrong. There's a right A, a right B, a right C. And so you're looking for the decision, the consequences of the decision you're making, and trying to anticipate, if I make this decision today, what are the consequences 3 months, 6 months, even a year from now, 2 years from now, if you're higher in the organization. So that's what you're thinking. It's not a right or wrong. And so I'd encourage people to get out of, did I make a bad decision? If you made a decision, now you have to live with that decision. So the only question is, what do you do next? And let's take a case. I'm going to come back to how do you kind of think about the decision in the process. But let's say you made a decision. You realize 2 weeks later it was a bad decision. It needs to be reversed or it needs to be changed. What do you do about it? Well, one is just say, ooh, this didn't turn out the way I wanted to. Come be clean with your superiors and with your team. Missed that, didn't see that, something changed. Okay, great. Now what? So what you're looking for is, what do we do now? In some cases, there's little you can do. Most of the time, the vast majority of the time, there's a shift, an adjust, a course correct that will make it go back on track if you just sort of say, oops, I hadn't seen that consequence, let's readjust. So what I want you to do is to worry less about was I right or wrong, and worry more about what are the consequences of the decision. And then if it isn't going the way you expected it to go, then I want you to think forward. What next? Not look backwards and beat yourself up. Does no good. All right, so that's one part of it. The second part of it is, if you struggle to make that decision, I want you to think about the consequences for your team of not making a decision. As you rightly said at the beginning, it slows down work. People are waiting on you. They can't make any progress. They don't get any tests done. They don't get any data in that says, should we go A or should we go B? So when you think about the consequences of not deciding, hopefully it gives you a little bit more courage to take a decision. All right, so there's two parts to consider. Look forward only, course correct if you need to. Don't be afraid to say we got it wrong. And then think about the consequences of not deciding. Now, the third piece of this one is, let's say it's a big decision, like are we going to invest several $100 million in a product or whatever number it is for you? Are we going to invest in this? That is a big decision. You don't want to make that decision day one, but you can make the decision to say, right, it's worth pursuing this investment. So could we make a small decision? Like we're going to pursue this and this as options, but we're going to reject C, D, E, F, let's make a small decision. That puts you on the next stage with some more information, with some more indication, moving towards that big decision, but you're one step closer to having the data you need to know where to go. And then you make the next small decision and the next small decision. It's like one of my podcast guests, I can't even remember who now. So whoever it is, write it in and claim credit for this one. But one of my podcast guests said, you want to say, what do we have to decide today? And what can we wait till later to decide? Make what you have to decide decision today. And if you can wait, then wait until you have to decide. So that's as you as a manager, all right? Now, part of your question was the reverse direction, which is, what if I am dealing with somebody who can't make a decision? How do I manage that person? All right, so I have two pieces of advice for you. Number one, get really smart about what that manager is struggling with. And you may think they're just can't decide. They're just being slow. Well, it's entirely possible that their boss is not on the same page, or that their boss's peers are not in agreement, or that the boss's boss has something to say about this, or that 5 other people need to weigh in before they feel like they can make a decision, or they're reversing a decision that one of their superiors made. There's so many reasons that your boss may be hesitating. You want to get smart about what that hesitation is about. That will make you a little more empathetic, but it also gives you clues about the kind of things you can do, like what information can you bring, who can you go and talk to, how can you get more information. And let's say it's a boss's peer that is causing the hiccup. All right. Do you have a colleague in the boss's peers organization that you can talk to and get some insight on and understand what the problems are over there and propose something for that might help move it forward? So it's not like you're reaching above your boss. You're reaching out to your peer level to say, can I get information here that will help us move forward? So first piece of advice is get smart about why. What is your boss hesitating on? And get out of the judgment that they just can't decide and look broadly around what may be slowing that decision down. Okay, then second piece of advice is a direct conversation with your manager. So manager, not making a decision on this is really slowing everybody down and really demotivating the team, or whatever the scenario is. And ask, is there a piece of data you need that will help this move forward? Can we do a small test here to see if A or B is right? Can we decide this part so at least we can get moving forward? Or regardless what we decide, we know we have to do A, B, C, D. Let's go ahead and do A, B, C, D because we have to do it regardless. So reframe it for your boss in those partial decisions or in what other information they need to be comfortable. If you do that, I think you're going to nudge your boss towards making a decision.
So if you're a manager, it's about thinking of the consequences of making the decision and also of the consequences of not making a decision. And if your manager is dragging their feet, figure out why and try to get smart about it and maybe confront them and tell them, what could we be doing to speed this along? And what are the consequences if we don't?
All right, I'm going to make a language correction, Bianca, as I always do with everybody when I'm coaching. You said confront. This is not a place I would confront your manager, because if you confront somebody who's hesitant, you're going to put them in defensive mode. You want to have the conversation that just lays the facts on the table, but don't go so far as to say, and manager, you're holding us all up, because then they get defensive. So just sort of say, I'm keen to move this a step forward because the team is impatient. And what do you need? So I can do that in a non-confrontational way, and I think you're going to have a much better response with that.
I like that, Wanda. That's great. Speaking of communication about decisions with your team and your boss, when would you say is it the right time to involve your team and your boss in a decision you're making?
When is it not a right time? I mean, okay, if it's a decision about a reorganization or firing somebody or, losing half the organization, maybe you have to be careful about that. But the biggest mistake I watch managers make is thinking that they are supposed to know all the information. They're supposed to have some keen wisdom and insight and then come back and announce it to the team. And when you do come back and announce it to the team, what you find is the team is not bought in. They're going to drag their feet. They're going to have a dozen questions. Eventually, you just may say, we'll do it that way anyway. It doesn't work very well. So the sooner you involve people in the decision process, the smarter they are, the more eyes you have on the data and the information. Everything's just better. So your job as a manager is not to know it all. Your job is to guide it, to steer it. You may have the final authority that says go or no go, but by the time you get to the no or go decision, I want that to be a foregone conclusion with the majority of the team because they've been invested. Okay, now with your manager, let's get political on this one just for a moment. Politically savvy, not politically manipulative. Sometimes your manager is not keen on an action you want to take, and you know that. So going to your manager and saying, I'm going to work forward on this decision and I want your input on it is probably not going to work very well. At the same time, hiding it and pretending you're not thinking about that is also not going to work very well. So we need to be very smart about this. We need to start by, again, understanding what's the manager concerned about. Take note, I need counter arguments for each of those concerns. All right? I might come back and say, I know you're worried about A, B, and C, but what if we do this? Would that relieve your worry about A and B? Okay, great. Now I can go tackle C. There's a lot you can do to build momentum to bring your boss along if you have the question of what if, what about, curiosity with it. And then you get your team engaged. Well, are we right? Does this really work? Okay? So think carefully about what your manager is seeing, ask, keep the conversation open, and then get some information on the backside. Again, I'm a big fan of running an experiment. If you can't make it work in a small experiment, you're probably not going to make it work at scale. So save everybody a bunch of hassle on that one.
I like that. Yes. And I think since we're on the topic of communication and improving communication with your team and within the manager and the team, and also the problem with we're halting progress if we're not communicating what the strategy is and what decisions we are making and why. I want to read you a comment from another reader who said that my manager seems overwhelmed and, I quote, is giving off headless chicken vibes, meaning they are constantly busy but seemingly without direction. There is no vision that is being communicated, And so my team just doesn't understand the why of everything that is going on and that we are delegated to do. No one ever gets out of our seemingly senseless stress loop. So I think that sort of ties into
I'm sorry.
Yes. I'm sorry too, but I think it ties into it. That is not communicating decisions, not communicating strategy. Would you agree with that?
Okay. All right. So I have two reactions to this, and I'm going to give my reactions first, and then I want to come back to the question and try to actually get some advice for this person. So first off, every company that I am spending time in, on every continent that I am spending time, in every industry that I'm spending time, and at every level that I'm spending time, CEO all the way down, I am hearing this equivalent of headless chicken. Now, I don't think people are trying to run around like headless chickens, but what I'm hearing is that people are so overwhelmed. So, for example, I heard from someone I know incredibly well, have worked with for a long time, very savvy leader and manager, who said, and I'm quoting close here, "I am so busy getting things done that are essential to get done that I can't even think 3 months ahead. I've instructed my team to do nothing other than the thing that they are mandated to do right now." Okay? Now, on the one hand, that sounds like great focus. You only do that, don't think anything about anything else. But there goes collaboration or some innovation. But I just want you to hear the manager's desperation of, "I am so overwhelmed, I don't know what else to do." And I'm hearing that sentiment everywhere around the world. So the headless chicken problem is really that sense of overwhelm. And if you know it, you feel overwhelmed, you're literally spinning around in circles. You know, you look at this and then you can't concentrate, and you look at something else and you can't concentrate. You look at the third thing, you can't concentrate. And so you just spin. And that's exactly what I think the listener and the person who's written in is experiencing from their manager. So if that is you as a manager, I need you to understand that A, it's incredibly apparent to everybody working with you, peers, bosses, juniors. B, you have got to get your stress under control or else. And I'll give a plug. Go check out a little ebook, Hack Your Hassle. We'll give you some advice about how to do that. But you've got to get that under control, because otherwise you can't actually spend the hours that you have in any productive way. And there is a bit of getting focused on what really will move the needle and being careful about what looks good in a candy store. You know, like, we don't want to choose all those would-be nice-to-haves. We got to get really, really focused on what makes a singular difference. Okay, so that's the advice for the manager. Okay, now I'm going to shift and say the other piece of what I hear, the other observation that I've seen for years, is that people in the organization want a clearer view of the strategy. But if I go to the leaders of the organization, they'll say the strategy is very clear. We have 3 pillars, A, B, and C. We're trying to do X, Y, and Z. Here's our major initiatives to get there. Like, the leaders of the organization say, it's out there. It's on the intranet. It's in every town hall. It's like, what do you mean you don't understand the vision? And I come back to people in the middle of the organization and they say, yeah, I know that. That isn't what I need. So I think we often use words of, "I don't understand the vision," when what we really mean to say is, "I don't know what's important or why it's important. I don't know where to put my efforts or where not to put my efforts." And so it's a very tactical question wrapped in visionary language. The visionary language doesn't work. So get tactical. So ask the tactical question. And don't just go open-ended to a manager and say, "Hey, manager, tell me what my priorities are," because the manager should turn to you and say, "That's your job, you go figure it out," in some version. So there's some truth in that. At the same time, you don't get to decide unilaterally what your priorities are, because there's a lot of stakeholders. So go think through what's on your plate, what you think is important, and why you think it's important. Come to your manager with a list. Here are 10 things I am trying to work on. I've put them in a rough order of top to bottom in terms of impact. And here's why I think each of these are in that order. Now, coach me. What did I get wrong? And, we can quibble if something's in a 2 or 3 or 4 position, but we shouldn't be quibbling much about the difference between 1 and 2 and 7 and 8 on that list. So don't worry about the exact rank ordering. Worry about the top 3, the middle 3, and the bottom 3 kind of thing. And, even the bottom 3, there may be things you have to do that are small, but then that says to you, I need to put a small amount of effort, not a massive amount of effort. And even if a manager is overwhelmed, you can steer them in a direction for you. All right, so that's one thing. And I'm going to give you one last thing to do, which is, yes, I understand that you may not be clear why you're doing what you're doing or why the team is doing what they're doing. But if you're leading a team, you should have some clue. You've got a good judgment about what this is about or why it's there. And if you think it's totally worthless, I dare you to just not do it and see what happens. So my guess is you've got more of a clue. So take that clue and go verify it. And maybe it's not with your manager, maybe it's with other stakeholders that you say, I think this is important because, am I right? Or I think this is not quite so critical, am I right? Or what is it you're really trying to get out of this so I can think about how we put the right resources against getting that tiny piece of information. But you can't just go open-ended. You got to go with your own thought and then ask for confirmation.
I like that.
Does that make sense, Bianca?
Yes, it makes perfect sense to me. Can I tell you a story that one of my bosses once told me about exactly this problem? So he said, imagine if my dishwasher broke and I spent every day washing my dishes for 30 minutes because I didn't have the 3 hours to repair that dishwasher. That is actually what happened to me. He said, I did this for 3 months. I washed my dishes every night because I did not have the time or the energy or the patience to repair my dishwasher. And when I, after 3 months, had someone else come and repair my dishwasher, I had 30 minutes every night to do something fun and to do something I enjoyed or to do something productive. So it's the same for work. We know that we need to repair the dishwasher, but in an office setting, we never stop and think about what it is that is eating up our time with no reason that we could be fixing or that could be something more strategic that we're working on. So what's your dishwasher?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great story. I love it. You're absolutely right. We do that every day, just kicking the can down the road, hoping that tomorrow will be better. And it doesn't usually.
It doesn't. And we're spending time.
I want to go back for a minute.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So take the time. Take the time. I know it's an investment of time, but then think about how much you get back. And everybody engages in this wishful thinking. Tomorrow will be easier. So you don't do it, and then tomorrow will be easier, and then it becomes it's weighing on you, and then you don't sleep, and then your manager's upset with you because it's not done, and then
the argument is I would need 3 hours to do it. I don't have 3 hours. I have 30 minutes a day. But how many days do you have?
Well, okay, I would argue that take that task of repairing the dishwasher or whatever it is and break it down into its micro pieces, because there are micro pieces. I need to ask 5 people who they use as a repair person. There's 5-minute task. Send 5 text messages. Then I need to look up the phone numbers for those 5 references. Okay, there's another 5-minute task. And then if you break it down and you do 5 minutes every day, it won't take you 3 months to figure out who to call to get your dishwasher repaired.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And it's your job as manager
we look at the
to figure
big
out
one.
What the dishwasher is. What is the bottleneck that is holding everybody back? And that's what only you can do.
That's right. That's right.
Great.
That is what only you can do. All right. I want to go back to this notion of the team that reports to me doesn't understand why we're doing something. And by the way, neither do I. Okay? All right. So we've talked about what you do as a manager if you don't know why your team is doing something. But your team should be rightly holding you accountable for why are we doing this? This makes no sense. And you should have some judgment. I mean, why did you ask them to do it? You had some reasoning. Tell them. And, people always say to me, well, we're doing it because it's our turn to do whatever. Really? That's the best answer you can give people? Like, there's a better answer if you just stop. It's like your parents said to you as a kid, you do it because I said so. Like, you got to do a better job with your team. And it's not that hard if you just stop and think about it.
Great. And I mean, sometimes even if you have a reason that motivates you, it's not the same reason that motivates your team. And I think that's also something to be aware of. And that's also something that someone actually sent in.
Yeah, before you go to the sentence, let me say, you said an important part there is I may be motivated because I want to make a contribution to my peers or I want to impress my boss. That doesn't mean my team is motivated by that. So I may still ask them to do a task, and I may still explain to them why this task is important to the organization, to my manager, to me, but it isn't the thing that's going to motivate them. And to motivate them, I've got to understand what do they want to learn, and how does this task help them learn that? And sometimes, granted, we ask people to do a payback to the organization. Fine, ask that. But then don't ask that for every single task you give.
Yes, absolutely. And that actually fits perfectly with the next person who sent something in. Kazi Toneva on LinkedIn said, I see many managers who expect others to be just like them without taking the time to understand their staff and how they operate. So that's why conflict arises.
Conflict arises for many reasons, but it does. So anybody who's been listening to me in the last year knows that I have been saying every single episode I can, and I say this with every client and every coaching engagement and so on. Whatever motivates you is unlikely to be the same as motivates everybody on your team. Whatever pushes you to do more is not going to be the same for somebody else. People don't think the way you think. They don't communicate the way you communicate. They're not motivated the same way you're motivated. They're just different, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're not trying to turn people into mini yous. Okay, granted, on occasion, that might be a nice strategy. It doesn't work very well, and it kills the diversity of thought that we so often are looking for. So the secret to managing a team is to understand each person uniquely. All right, and I'm going to make this super simple for people who don't understand that. Number one question, know something about that person's outside work life. What do they care about? What are their hobbies? What are they trying, just like what do they do with their time? And it could be anything, just any small thing. You need to know something about them personally. All right. Are they on a sports team? Do they, have a hobby as a singer on the weekend? Do they have a sideline business? Just like something personally about them. The second thing you need to know as a manager is what does that person want to learn? What are they looking to get better at in order to make themselves a stronger professional? Now, yes, they may not stay with me as the manager, but that means they're going to have really good experience. That means I'm going to upskill them. I'm going to get more out of them. And that's a win at the end of the day. But I need to know what everybody is looking to learn. If I know what everybody's looking to learn or looking to develop, then I know where my motivation angles are. Okay? So if you just know those two things, you're part of the way home. If you're looking for the, kind of graduate course, then I need to know how each person prefers to communicate. What's their comfort zone on communication? Are they good thinking on their feet or not? Do they have a very strong outspoken personality or more reticent personality? Are they very candid and prefer that direct, hard-hitting message or not? So just some basics on how they prefer to communicate will also help you make sure you kind of land your messages in the right way. So something personal, what they want to learn, and their communication preferences.
Great. Do they want to chit-chat or do they want to go straight into business? Do they... there's so many things.
Absolutely.
It's the same for bosses, I think, too. If you are in a team and you want to communicate better with your manager, these are also the things that can help you figure out how to get to know them and what they want.
Absolutely. I mean, if you want to get along better with your manager, with your boss, then understanding this communication preference is a really big deal. And, do they want an email, a text message, a phone call, a drop by the office, a formal meeting? Like, what do they want? What works for them? Not for you. What works for them? And then B, what information do they want to know? Like, do they want every detail? Do they want to know the highlight issues? Is there an issue that they're really keen on staying on top of because their boss is asking about it? What do they want to know, in what format and through what medium? And that is not a hard question to ask. and get information. And then check in, try it for 3 months and say, am I getting it right? Is it the right information? Is it the right medium? Is there a different format? It's not a one size fits all, really, truly.
And you don't want everybody to be the same on your team. You already know what you're going to think about it. You want someone else to give you a different opinion at the end of it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. All right. So the person who's asking about the manager who's not recognizing that people are different. Okay. There are things you can do to help your manager steer in the right direction. And that is you're forthcoming to your manager. Hey, manager. And I wouldn't start with saying, hey, manager, you think everybody's the same and we're not. That is that's an accusation, and that's not going to land very well. And you probably get a defensive reaction, and it'll work.
Back to confronting.
But you can say, manager. Well, sometimes confronting is right, but this is not the time to confront. This is not the way to confront. All right. So, but you can say, all right, manager, I really appreciate that you're trying to communicate with us, or whatever the issue is. Just something that you appreciate about that manager. For me, I am better if I do a better job. I can process better. I'm more attentive. Whatever you want to say, and you just put your statement about what you wish your manager would do differently for you. Now, you can't dictate it. You can't demand it. All you can do is make a statement. I would do better job if I had an agenda in advance. I could think about it and come prepared, or whatever your request is. You make a request and then you leave it. The manager will take the advice or not take the advice. They will do or not to do. You can come back again in a couple of months and say in a slightly different way the same thing. See if it lands then. If not, then you got to learn to adapt.
I like that. Yeah. And maybe it's even good to learn how to adapt, because in your life, you're going to get many people that are not like you. And if you learn how to do it fast, that's going to help you later on, right?
So, Bianca, I have to tell a story on this one about the power of adapting. Okay, so I'm not asking anybody to become a different person. It doesn't work very well. You are who you are. You have the preferences that you have. But all of us can make simple adaptations. And I'm going to go back to Will Schutz, whom you know is one of my favorite researchers. He developed a thing called FIRO-B, Fundamental Interpersonal Relationship Orientation - Behavior. FIRO-B. Anybody who's been in a class with me knows that I'm a big fan of using those because they're particularly insightful about relationships. But the start of the work of Schutz's work was looking at U.S. naval command crews, some of whom were doing brilliantly as a team and some of whom were a disaster as a team. And his job as a young psychologist was to figure out why. What is it that's happening in the good teams and what is going wrong in the bad teams or the disastrous teams? And this is peculiar because the naval commanders have all gone through the exact same training. On each boat, they're the exact same roles. They're the exact same responsibilities. Everybody's trained the same. And how is it that one team functions and another team doesn't function so well? Right, and there's some obvious places you would look. You would first go and say, well, are the teams that are functioning well, they're all alike? And the answer is no. Okay, well, there's greater diversity. The answer is no. Sometimes very homogeneous teams functioned really well. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes diverse teams functioned really well. Sometimes they didn't. So diversity and homogeneity is not the answer. What is the answer is what became the subject of FIRO-B. But essentially, the teams that were functioning were because people sat down to talk about each other's preferences, largely in how they communicated and related. And when people were willing to say, oh, okay, that's how you like it, I can adjust, is when the team functioned. So when there's a crisis or when there's a warning sign, what I need is just 30 seconds to collect my thoughts and think. Don't come at me immediately with a question. Just give me 30 seconds. Now, granted, it's a crisis. We got to move, but just give me a moment to collect. I'm going to do a better job. It's doable. That's maybe an extreme adaptation. Somebody who says, I do better with a written checklist. That helps me be sure that I haven't missed anybody. Somebody else who says, I don't like a written checklist. They don't work for me because that's not how my brain works. Okay, we can adjust to those. They're very simple adaptations, and it's the willingness to adapt that made the team functional.
Sounds great. I'm someone who loves a deadline, for example. Other people hate them.
Yeah. And some people want to start early, some people don't. Now, if you don't finish your work on time, that's a problem, but most people who are late starters still get the job done. So, okay, like, what do we each need? And it's the conversation about it and the simple, doable adaptations that make all the difference in team performance. The same is true for managers, and the same true for team members with their managers. Adapt. Figure out what the person is asking for, is at their best. Find a way to give them part of it at least. Talk about it.
And like you said, give feedback in a roundabout way so it doesn't sound like you're criticizing your boss for their behavior, but just giving feedback about what would be good for you.
Right. Saying what's good for me. And it's not so much as roundabout, because I can be very direct about what it is that works for me. What I can't be direct about is my insistence that somebody meet my needs.
Or that someone else.
So I can say very clearly, I can say very clearly, this isn't working for me. Not a problem. But what we do next, I can't dictate on. I need to wait for the other person to come and say, oh, well, what would you like? Then I can say, well, this would work for me. Could you do that? And there's where that curiosity and openness needs to come in. So there becomes a bit of a negotiation. What we mistake in feedback is we're not explicit about what's really not working. We don't own it. We use some loose language like, I need you to be more of a team player, which doesn't mean anything. And you don't own it. You need to say, this for me is causing me a problem. Pause. Don't tell the other person how to do their job. Pause. Are they willing to adjust or not adjust? Their choice, not yours.
I like that.
And if everybody would get that message, then I'd never do another feedback training course again in my life.
I suspect you will do another one.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Speaking of feedback, there's actually a comment on this topic that I will read to you. And I quote, I used to get immediate feedback on pretty much everything I did. Now that I'm a manager myself, people have stopped giving me feedback. I'm not in a company where regular 360 reviews are a thing. So how do I make sure I still improve, and who do I ask and how?
All right. The reason you don't get feedback is because you're probably doing the technical parts of the job very, very well. All right. So early in your career, you get that easy feedback that is much more technical. You made this mistake. You forgot that. This didn't check. Next time, let's do that. You need to bring this person in. Here's how to say that. It's much more tactical. Okay. As you become a mid-level manager and above, the issues for improvement are much more nuanced and much more subtle. And they're loose things like people don't understand what you're talking about, or you don't hold the attention of the room when you're speaking, or you look too nervous in front of the senior leaders. They're very loose, and they're very difficult as a result to give feedback on. So you're probably not having any major problems. You'd probably get some feedback, but there's probably some nuances you could shift to do better. All right. So I want you to have a little empathy. It's really hard to give feedback on those nuanced issues. Really, really hard. The tactical, not a problem. On the nuanced ones, your manager may get more comfortable with this, and they may not. So what you're going to hear, if they do even try, is a language that sounds like corporate speak. You need to improve your executive presence. You need to be more of a team player. You need to bring people along with you. You need to have more confidence. They're very loose, and they sound like judgments. And it's easy to say, what does that mean? Why are you saying that? What do you want me to do? I don't know what you're talking about. And all of which are being a little bit defensive. And fair enough, because that was loose feedback. So what I need you to do is to not argue with it, not ask a probing question, and just say, oh, okay, let me think about that. And then I want you to go away and actually kind of do some homework. What could that be about? So let's say somebody says to you, you can't hold the attention of the room. Okay, well, go and talk to some people who are really good at this and say, well, what do you think makes you really good at it? Go and Google it. Try ChatGPT or whatever your other favorite AI is and get some ideas around what that might be about. And then do a little self-assessment. What do I think I'm good at? What do I think I'm not good at? All right, so now I've got 3 things that I think I'm not so good at in holding the attention of your room. And they probably have to do with I speak too fast, for example, or I have a lot of nervous fidgets I'm fidgeting with something in my hands, or I don't know where to stand. So 3 very simple, very fixable things. Now you take those back to your manager and you say, manager, I've been reflecting. It seems to me that I don't do these 3 things very well. Is that fit with what you were seeing? Okay, and if the answer is yes, then you know what you now need to develop. Check, get your plan in place. But your homework there of deciphering that loose, ambiguous message is really on you. Because if you go back to the manager and say, explain it to me, the manager doesn't know how to explain it. They haven't thought about it deeply. They know their judgment is right, and they'll go, oh, well, don't worry about it. You're fine. So go do your homework, okay? So that is one way that you're going to get better feedback. Another way to get better feedback is to name the issue that you're worried about. So you might say to a manager, look, I realize that feedback at this level is tricky, but I want to hear your perception. So, for example, I've been listening to this podcast, for example, and I know that if I can't be persuasive in my communication, particularly with my peers and superiors, then I'm not going to have as strong of a career as I want to have. And I don't think I do this as well as I could. So tell me, manager, what do you see? Is there a place you think I could improve my persuasiveness in communication? All right, now why that works is you've not made your manager think up something out of the blue to tell you. Your manager is not going to be worried about demotivating you because you already see this as a skill. And your manager can help say, how big of a problem is this? Is it a small problem, a big problem? Kind of calibrate and can even say, I don't know, let me think about it. And you say, well, great, come watch this next presentation and then give me feedback afterwards. You just made it easier to have a conversation because you named the issue at the beginning. So that's tactic. Tactic number 1 is go decipher the loose language. Tactic number 2 is to ask a very precise question. All right. And then tactic number 3 is skip your manager. You can ask anybody in the organization that you work with one of my favorite questions, and it comes from Sheila Heen. I have to give her full credit because this is her question. Just say to somebody, what's the one thing that if I do differently would make a difference for you? You're not promising to do it. You're not saying this is changing my career. You're just asking what one thing would make a difference to you. And I find most people will give you something, especially if they work with you on a regular basis. They'll say, it's not that hard. And if you've been shown that openness, then I think you can get some answers. Collect that from 5 or 10 people that you're working with. Look for the similarities. Well, there you go. That's what you need to work on.
And do it one at a time. And then you make sure that you're not getting...
One at a time.
You're fine.
And you are fine. We're looking for polishing. You're looking for nuanced differences that have more people buying into your leadership. That's what we're looking for.
I'm going to pivot because we have time for one more thing. And I'm going to ask you, what's the one thing? In fact, what's the one thing, Wanda, according to you, that is holding people back when it comes to management?
Okay, to say that there's one thing I think is unfair because there are several things. But let me say, what's the one thing I see more often than any other single problem? And that is this inability to get the balance right between being in the details and being in the clouds. And let's admit, some details are needed and some clouds are needed. I need both, but I got to get the balance right. And it's a balance for the situation. The tendency I see way too often is you know all the details. Or maybe you don't know all the details and feel you need to know all the details to understand what's going on in the team. And so you spend way too much time diving, demotivate the team, end up owning all the actions yourself because you think somehow you are the only one who can do it, or that your team isn't ready, or they're letting you, so you think they can't do it. But that too much time in the details. And people who do that will justify that 101 ways. And if you're listening to my words and trying to say yes, but, I am telling you, you're already too much into the details. The fact that you say that means you're too much in the details. So it's a huge thing. The reason it's a huge thing is because you're never letting your team elevate itself. You're not showing to your managers that you've got the capacity to do more. You're not focused on what is it that only you can do and what are the big things that you need to move. You're not letting your team grow. You're overprotecting them. It doesn't work. So I see that more often than not. Now, occasionally I see people who are too much in the clouds. So they don't actually know what is going on with the team or where the team is struggling or where the team is not performing the way they're needed by other parts of the organization. But the most common problem is too in the details. So I'm going to give you a story about this. All right. So a woman that I have coached recently has just taken a big new role, major step up. In the step up in that role, was worried about this whole area that she had really developed and nurtured and grown, and didn't think that the team underneath her was ready to step into the leadership role, and that meant the company would have to go out to the external market to find a leader that did have the right capabilities, and that would slow everybody down by 6 months at a minimum. By the time you find somebody, get them in, they come up to speed, a minimum of 6 months. But she's going to take the new job for a host of wonderful, appropriate, and for the organization, good reasons. All right. What happens is that one member of her team, who was maybe closer than everybody else, is suddenly elevated to take her old job. And guess what? That one member is succeeding way faster, coming up the curve way faster than she thought possible. All right, there's the biggest clue you have that your team has more capability than you've been permitting them to demonstrate. So, you were too far in the weeds. Easy to see. And the caution is, if you're overprotecting your team, you're never really testing what they can do. So stop. It's not good for them. It's not good for you. It's not good for the organization. That's the thing, Bianca, I see more often than not, that too much in the weeds and can't get yourself out of it.
Great. I love it. Well, that's us for today. Otherwise, we get too much into the details. So,
absolutely.
To all the listeners, if you ask more questions, you're going to get them answered, as you can see here. And do reach out, send us a message, send Wanda a message on Instagram at Wanda T. Wallace, on YouTube at Out of the Comfort Pod, or on LinkedIn, Wanda T. Wallace. All right. That's us for today. Any last words, Wanda?
Nope. See you next time.
See you next time.
Keep those questions and comments coming in. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you for listening.